Why does this tiny piece of land dominate global attention? Why do people react emotionally to Israel in ways they would not react to any other country? What if one of the greatest spiritual dangers is not rejecting God, but rejecting the life God is trying to lead you into? Because sometimes people pray for change, dream about change, wait for change. But when the moment finally arrives, they step backwards. People say they want purpose, but they fear responsibility. People say they want meaning, but they fear transformation. People say they want redemption, but when redemption begins disrupting comfort, suddenly they hesitate. And honestly, that may be one of the deepest human patterns of all. And maybe that is the real story of the spies. Because the strange part of the story is not that they were afraid. Fear is normal. In fact, later in the Torah, when the Jewish people go to war, the Torah literally says, if someone is afraid, he should go home. Therefore, if fear alone was not the problem, why did God react so strongly? Why was this considered one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history? And maybe the answer is disturbing, because the spies were not rejecting land. They were rejecting the future relationship with God was trying to bring them into. And honestly, the same struggle still exists now, because this was never merely about geography. The land of Israel was not just another country. This land was promised to Abraham. The land the Torah revolves around, the place where prophecy emerged, the place where the temple would stand, the place where heaven and earth would meet. So, why did they not want it? What exactly disturbed them so deeply that God considered their reaction almost a rejection of Him Himself? And maybe the answer changes the entire story. Because according to many of the deepest explanations in Judaism, the spies were not afraid of dying. They were afraid of the type of life Israel demanded. Because until this moment, the Jewish people were living completely above nature. Food fell from heaven. Water came from a rock. Clouds protected them. Their clothing never wore out. God was obvious every single day. But Israel was different. Israel demanded entering physical life itself. Agriculture, government, an army, economics, and of course, responsibility as well as nationhood. Therefore, the spies believed entering the land would lower their spirituality. And suddenly, the story becomes terrifying. Because now, the spies do not sound so evil at all. They sound spiritual. And that is exactly what makes this story dangerous. Because they believed they were protecting holiness itself. But they misunderstood the entire purpose of creation. Because Judaism was never meant to remain in the desert. The desert was temporary. The goal was always the land of Israel. And here is the most important part that most people miss completely. The holiness of Israel is not merely that it is special. The holiness of Israel is that it is the place where God and the physical world meet. This is the land the Torah says God's eyes are upon constantly, from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. This is the land where prophecy emerged, where the divine presence rested openly among a nation, where the temple stood. where the Jewish people could become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And, unlike every other land, Israel responds spiritually. The Torah says if the Jewish people abandon God, the land itself stops cooperating. Rain stops. The earth weakens. Exile begins. But when the Jewish people return and the land comes alive again, and that is unbelievable if you really think about it, because the land itself becomes part of the relationship. The soil, the fruit, the rain, the agriculture, history itself, and therefore, the holiness of Israel is not escaping nature. It's bringing God into nature so deeply that even the land itself responds. And this is exactly what the spies could not handle. Because in the desert, holiness was separated from physical reality. But Israel demanded holiness inside physical reality, taking fruits from the land and bringing them to Jerusalem, working the soil, but revealing God through the work, building a nation, but making that nation holy, living inside of nature, but revealing something above nature through nature itself. And that is much harder, because now spirituality is no longer escape. Now spirituality becomes responsibility. And that is why the Torah can only be fully lived in the land. Not because Jews cannot keep mitzvahs elsewhere, but because the Torah was designed to create a holy civilization, a holy economy, a holy agriculture, a holy society, a holy priestly nation living on God's land. That is why the spies described it as a land of great measure, because Israel magnifies everything. The relationship with God becomes more intense here. History becomes more intense here. The consequences become more intense in Eretz Yisrael. And maybe that's why the world is obsessed with Israel to this very day. Think about it honestly. Why does this tiny piece of land dominate global attention? Why do people react emotionally to Israel in ways they would not react to any other country? Because consciously or subconsciously, the world senses that Israel represents something much bigger than politics. Israel represents the possibility that God is active in history, that physical reality itself can become holy, that an actual nation can reveal divine purpose. And the prophets say something even more radical. One day, the nations of the world will see this, not merely hear about it, witness it. The prophets say the nations will grab onto the garment of the Jew and say, Nilcha imochem, let us go with you. Why? Why does the Gentiles want to come to the Jews? Because they will witness God's relationship with Israel unfolding through history itself, through the survival of the Jewish people, through the rebuilding of the land, through the return of the exile, through the impossible becoming reality. And maybe that is why the sin here is so catastrophic, because the spies were rejecting far more than geography. They were rejecting the mission to reveal God through an actual nation, on an actual land, inside actual history. And honestly, that argument never really ended, because even today, many people still want spirituality disconnected from the land, disconnected from nationhood, disconnected from physical existence itself. But the Torah's vision was always bigger. Not to escape the world, but to transform the world. And the center of that transformation was always Eretz Yisrael. Because the spies saw the land, but they did not understand what the land truly was. And maybe that's why the story suddenly feels very uncomfortable today. Because for the first time in 2,000 years, the Jewish people are back. Not from a dream, not from a prayer, not an ancient memory. They're actually back. Over 7 million Jews living in the land of Israel. The mountains, the trees are alive again. The desert is blooming. Hebrew is spoken again in the streets of Jerusalem. An army, a government, entire cities that lay desolate are now rebuilt. And of course, children playing in the land just as the prophets described. And honestly is one of the most shocking events in human history, because no nation has ever returned home after this long. No people survived exile like this. No language returned like this. No prophecy unfolded like this. But despite all this, many Jews still hesitate. And maybe that is what makes the story of the spies so terrifying, because the final exile is not Egypt. The final exile is comfort, especially the comfort of exile. The belief that maybe we can permanently build our future somewhere else. And yet, at the exact time, anti-Semitism rises again across the globe. Confusion rises. Pressure rises. History starts moving again. And it almost feels as though God keeps reminding the Jewish people, the story is not finished yet. Come home. Because deep down, every Jew feels something when they stand in the land. Tam u'ru'u. Taste it. Not merely nationalism, not merely emotion, something deeper. Like the soul recognizing its place, as if the land itself remembers us. And maybe that's because this relationship was never really normal. The Torah describes the bond between the Jewish people and the land of Israel like a marriage, a living covenant. And despite everything, despite exile, despite destruction, despite war, despite every attempt to erase the Jewish people from history, the Jewish people came back, which means something unbelievable. The prophets were right, not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. And if that part came true, maybe, just maybe, people will start to believe that the prophets, what they prophesize, will actually happen. Maybe history is really moving somewhere. Maybe redemption is not fantasy. Maybe the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is not the end of the story at all. Maybe it's only the beginning. And honestly, that should not make a Jew afraid. It should make a Jew hopeful, because for the first time in thousands of years, we are watching the words of the prophets unfold in real time. And maybe the greatest tragedy of the spies was that they stood on the edge of redemption, but could not bring themselves to step into it. So the real question now is not what they saw. The real question is, do we see it? Thank you for watching. Shalom from just outside Jerusalem.